And I really, honestly, I believe that this idea is still a very radical idea. It's still very radical, and it's especially the socialism from below aspect of it. I was watching the film X-Men 3 the other day. I love this film. I love all superhero films. They're so fun. But I was thinking about, it relates. I know, it relates. I was thinking about how, the bad guy in the film, you don't have to have seen it. The bad guy in the film is this guy Magneto, who has these, fantastic powers or whatever. He's like the bad guy. Could there be some kind of popular democratic, revolution of people rising up against Magneto? No, you couldn't do it. Because Magneto has too much power concentrated in his hands, it would be impossible. Really, what is required is some unique individual who is also very powerful to stand up to Magneto, or maybe a team of individuals, but still a very select few, to stand up to Magneto and kind of conquer him. And it's not just about comic books or comic book-based movies, it's about political life, because that is still the dominant idea in political life today. The dominant idea, excuse me, phones. Whew. The dominant idea in political life today is that for every George Bush there must be an Obama, that we require some talented special individual or group of individuals to fight for us, and that without them we have no hope. We need some great leader, you see, or something along those lines. Is still the dominant popular conception of politics and how things will change or might change in politics. The idea of self-emancipation, which again is Marx's idea of not socialism from above, but socialism from below. And as Marx put it, all previous historical movements were movements of minorities, numerical minorities, he means, or in the interest of minorities. The proletarian movement, that is the workers' movement, is the self-conscious, independent movement of the immense majority in the interest of the immense majority. He says communism is the complete restoration of man to himself as a social, i.e. human being, a restoration which has become conscious and which takes place within the entire wealth of previous periods of development. It is the solution of the riddle of history and knows itself to be the solution. It is the solution to the riddle of history and knows itself to be the solution. That is, the working class movement, the popular movement, is not just somebody else's stage army to manipulate, to roll out and roll in, but really the socialist movement envisioned by Marx and Engels is a self-conscious movement, a movement that has ideas about itself, a movement that knows what it's about, that knows itself and knows itself to be the solution. Historically, what does this really look like? What are we really talking about here? What we're talking about is, and we should talk about some of the examples, and I'm sure there's books here that we can point out that go through them. Historically, like what has gone down, what does this really look like? What it looks like is a working class movement that usually has some element of strike activity, usually a lot of strike activity, but that expands beyond just one workplace to many workplaces. To many workplaces that strike somehow in a kind of collaborative way, in coordination with each other. A strike that's not just about pay me this, but that's about get him out of jail. That's about stop this war, that has political demands in addition to economic ones. That's anti-racist or anti-war. That's pro-immigrant. That's pro-women. A movement that encompasses those other demands and is based out of the workplaces. And that at some point does not seek just to get your local socialist elected to office, but seeks itself to have power in its own organizations, in the very same organizations that organized all those strikes and all that coming together and organizing of people, that those organizations then have some kind of confrontation with the state. And I think that is, that's what they argue, when Marx and Engels argue in the Communist Manifesto, which, by the way, I think now is the time to go back and read the Communist Manifesto and talk about this thing. There's a lot to it. But what they basically argue is that it's about winning the battle for democracy. It's about winning political supremacy. The working class does that and then will wrest by degrees from the rich what they got. We have to take from them the railroads, the banks, the means of transportation, and of exchange. How do we do that? Well, I think, again, I started by saying that there's a profound ideological change going on. I think it's important to note that that is taking place whether we have these meetings or not. That is already going on. It's part of the lay of the land. That is, there's something going on that kind of goes with what we're saying out there in the world. It's not just, we're not just out there beating our heads against the wall. There's something about capitalism that opens people's minds up to these kinds of possibilities and ideas. And Marx and Engels were very clear about not taking as their beginning, some kind of like dogmas. They were not dogmatic. They actually, there were socialists before them who were like, they called them utopians, because they would spend a lot of time drawing up, very specific schemes. Okay, we'll put the shoe factory over there. You'll work in that. We'll put the dog park over here. They were like, laid it all out. Marx and Engels said, it's like a total waste of time. That socialism grows out of a movement that's actually going on in the world. It's not about some idea foisted on people from above. He says, look, we do not confront the world in a doctrinaire way with a new principle. Here is the truth, kneel down before it. This is Marx and Engels. We develop new principles for the world out of the world's own principles. We do not say to the world, cease your struggles, they are foolish. We will give you the true slogan of struggle. We merely show the world what it is really fighting for, explaining to it the meaning of its own actions. That is, we don't start with some kind of utopian abstractions. We begin with the world as it actually is. Not as we would imagine it to be. And even in the manifesto, they go so far as to say, where do the socialists where do they get all these socialist ideas? All these ideas I'm spouting, where do they come from? All these ideas in these books, where do they come from? I don't know. No, I'm just kidding. There's an answer. But this edition, here we go. Thank you. The theoretical conclusions of the communists is the same for that of all, are in no way, the theoretical conclusions of the communists are in no way based on ideas or principles that have been invented or discovered by this or that would-be universal reformer. They merely express, in general terms, actual relations springing from an existing class struggle, from an historic movement going on under our very eyes. That is, the struggle between the classes, which Marx and Engels argued was always going on, be it high or be it low, that it comes and it goes, it has cycles and waves, as we know historically, but that it's always going on, and that is the source of all of our kind of socialist knowledge and understanding. It's about learning from those struggles and then applying what we've learned in the previous round of struggles to the next round. That really is the mission of socialists. If you agree with that, then I think you should absolutely think tonight about joining the ISO and joining this project. I'll just say this, I really do believe that we're going into a political moment now where millions of people are deciding that they are ready to fight for things. And I think things that feel very much within our reach, in part because of the ideas that have been raised by Obama. Obama is trying to create jobs. He wants to create he has some 3.5 million jobs planned, except we just lost 4 million jobs in the last few months. So that ain't enough. But still it raises the idea that there ought to be jobs, or that the government ought to do something to create jobs, and that gives us an enormous leverage, if you will, a kind of ideological leverage to go in and argue for that. We're not arguing crazy stuff. Obama's creating a public, he wants to do this like public healthcare plan alongside a private healthcare plan. Okay, well, that's not going to be good enough. As long as he's preserving the role of the private health insurers, we're going to have all the same problems. People who have an incentive to deny care. We have to, but still that gives us a leg up to argue to abolish the private health insurance companies and have a nationalized plan. Obama campaigned using the iconography of the left and the anti-war movement. We can end a war was one of his television slogans, except he ain't doing it. He's maintaining the mega bases in Iraq, and he's sending more troops to Afghanistan. But still, the fact that the idea of ending the war is a good thing, and that's what we're kind of all officially for, that has raised the idea that I think we can use to come in and make an argument about what the war is really about. In other words, in a number of different ways, even the stimulus, they cannot say to us anymore, you have to take these budget cuts because, we're sorry, Brian, there just isn't the money. They can't say that. They can't say that after they shoveled $1 trillion back to the bankers, that there isn't the money, that the money doesn't exist. The money clearly does exist. It can be gotten at the drop of a hat. Clearly it can be. It's a question of priorities. And therefore, an enormous